Hey, Sejin, what American film embracing a comic book adaptation features Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and one other fellow transformed from the norm by the nuclear goo?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows.
No, I'm sorry.
Secret of the Ooze.
No, it's not. No, it's not that.
Turtles in Time.
No, no. Is that what they call the third one? Do they officially call it Turtles in Time now?
No, I don't know actually what the third one is referred to as. I've always called it that. I didn't realize it wasn't its real name.
No, it was just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Also, not the proper answer.
Oh.
I mean,
TMNT.
All of those feature. I mean, that's not right technically either. They all feature Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, but in this film, that one other fellow, he's the leader of the crew. Transformed from the norm by the nuclear goo.
Goop. The nuclear goop. Yeah, right.
No, it's goo. It's just goo. This isn't Creepy Crawler's TV show, cartoon. What are you doing?
Ninjas, not just of body but of mind. Those were the words that the master instructed, but the letter from Shredder had Splinter abducted.
All right, so
there are so many good lines.
There's so many good,
song.
and I mean, we could just do a podcast about the partners in crime, TURTLE, power credits wrap up. Like that's a podcast alone. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This bit.
Now the villain is chilling, so you make a stand. Back to the wall, put your sword in your hand. Remember the words of your teacher, your master. Evil moves fast, but good moves faster than light shining on your illumination.
Okay.
That is actually the rest of that lyric.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. Give me a quarter. I need to call a reporter. Get April O'Neil here on the double. Okay, so this is it. Obviously, hi, welcome to the Say Report. I'm Devin Decker. He's Sejin Sarowick. He's losing his mind over there. And he's losing his mind because we're doing a time capsule episode. And we're doing a time capsule episode on a film that released in 1990 that featured Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, making up a team with one other fellow, Raphael, the leader of the crew, transformed from the norm by the nuclear goo. That's the last time I'm going to say it, maybe. At least for now. Like, maybe later on, like an hour down the line, I'll give myself credit, but we've said it enough at this point. So it's the Say Report time capsule episode celebrating 30 years of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I really appreciate Sejin in this moment because, and this is a big one, I would have seen this in theaters this weekend if we weren't in the midst of the coronavirus COVID-19 quarantine. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of bums me out. It bums me out for a secondary reason, and that being on March 7th, I had tickets to go see a screening of this in New Hampshire, where, you know, original creators of TMNT would have been present, but we decided that that probably wasn't smart based on everything that we were hearing about this COVID-19 thing. Mm-hmm. And then, what did we do? We didn't go, and then I saw that it was coming to places in November, and I'm like, they'll have sorted this out, right? By then.
Right. Oh, perfect. Once all of this is blown over, we can go and do it then.
Nope. And actually, the secondary anger, and I want to address it here, because I don't want to be angry on a proper show. I'll drop my anger in a time capsule with everything else. Over the last couple of years, for the 30th or like 40th anniversaries of the Godfather films, I got to see The Godfather and Godfather Part 2 in cinema. And that was awesome. Like, that was just an excellent thing to do. And this is, no word of a lie, 1990 is when The Godfather Part 3 came out.
Yeah, so where's this going?
So even though The Godfather Part 3 is garbage, is not a very good movie, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I love it because of the whole Vatican subplot where, like, they're trying to, like, partner up with the Catholic Church to become the best criminal empire ever. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so for the 30th anniversary, Turner Classic Movies has to bring back The Godfather Part 3. And it was actually revealed in an article that I read like just yesterday that no, TCM's not bringing it back. Francis Ford Coppola, who's still alive, come to find out, has re-edited The Godfather Part 3 for a theatrical release on December 4th, 2020.
That's a real poke in the eye to Sofia Coppola. Wasn't she the one that took over that franchise for the third movie?
No, God, no. Sofia Coppola is in the film. She actually acts in the film.
Okay.
And that's the whole thing where people are like, Sofia Coppola ruined The Godfather Part 3. Not because she directed it poorly, because she existed in it poorly.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought she, for some reason, I misunderstood. I thought that she had actually had some creative power over it. And so I was like, that's a little bit of a shitty move to be like, I'm going to go fix your movie, kid.
So Sejin admitting to me right now that he has never seen The Godfather Part 3. That's what I'm hearing.
I've seen The Godfather Part 3. What do you mean? I just thought she had directed it.
Nah, she was like a baby. She was an actual baby in The Godfather, but she was still very, very young in The Godfather Part 3, like early 20s. And she hadn't established herself as a director, someone who did Lost in Translation yet. But it's called The Death of Michael Corleone. And I'm like, oh, so in addition to not getting to see Godfather Part 3 in cinema because of COVID-19, I also, like, Francis Ford Coppola's like, I'm going to make it better. I'm going to somehow make this movie that everybody hates better. And he probably did it. And I'm not going to get to see it in theater, and that bums me out. And that's it. I think that's all. You have any anger that you want to dump into this time capsule before we get to the proper thing?
No. I didn't know we were going to lose our shit about The Godfather today. I would have prepared my fucking...
Sejin, I didn't know I was going to lose my shit about The Godfather today until thinking about the fact that I should have been seeing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie, in a movie theater twice this year, and both times it didn't work out. And spoilers, but like not real spoilers, I've never seen this movie in a movie theater because I was 4 when it came out. And this is not one of those ones that like gets replayed. The closest I saw was at a condo. They did a showing in their screening room.
Yeah, I think I had the pleasure of seeing it one time when Cinema World used to do their old movie.
Their Friday nights. Yeah, those are fun.
And I think I had the benefit of seeing it there once, and that was at this point 6 years ago, and it was midnight, and you know, so my experience of watching it was fuzzy at best.
My time seeing it at that condo screening was the worst. It's probably one of the worst film experiences I've ever had because unbeknownst to me, the group that I went to see that movie with had wanted to go to make fun of it. And like, no, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 is not a film that should be derided. It's a fucking masterpiece.
Look, at the end of the day, we have to admit this up front. I am not going to win any arguments with this today because I'm talking to a man that has taken over 24 pages of notes.
I did. Well, that's the other thing. Sejin is also off his game for this first 10 minutes of the episode because I counted my notes to him, and it's 24 pages, and half of those is before they even leave New York.
What I will say is this. It is a fantastic movie. I am not going to take that away from it. It is something that is hugely important in the history of cinema. It is hugely nostalgic for me and for millions of people. Like it hits all of the right notes. For me, it feels like a Christmas sweater. It's not the thing that you wear to work. It's not the thing that you even wear when you go out sometimes. But there is a time and a place for it, and when you wear it, it is perfect, right? Like that is what this kind of movie is. It's not even like I feel like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the only movie that fits that category. I think there's a few movies out there that are just too loved, too good, too satisfying that even though there are some ugly bits to it, like that just adds to the magic of it, because there's a couple of ugly things that we got to talk about in this movie. Masterpiece to me implies that it is flawless and to this day flawless, and there's definitely a couple of things here or there that we need to start we need to dig into.
Well, I'm very excited that we're having this discussion because those are moments. Obviously, the Say Report, when we look at movies, one of the big things that we do, we kind of discuss the dangers of nostalgia. And the fact that, like, the things that make us feel comfortable, like that Christmas sweater, which, Siegen, I'm a break for a second to say on point with the metaphor, because this is probably dropping in December. I mean, I hope not, but it probably is going to happen because, you know, Christmas happens, and that's why we have these time capsules in order to fill in when one of us is busy. But, like, we look at the nostalgia and we look at those things that, like, are dangerous about nostalgia. And there were definitely moments in this film where I'm like, I wonder. But I actually think this is sort of a precursor to the more disgusting elements that we have touched on, you know, very not recently in the history of the Say Report. Things that occurred in, like, the Jim Carrey trilogy. My thoughts on the Kevin Smith movies and their place in 2020. I feel like
even offhandedly, we've talked about, like, the history of, like, action films throughout, like, the 90s and stuff, like True Lies and things like that, really kind of showing us that the 80s machismo bullshit was really and officially not working anymore, because, like, it was just kind of gross, and, you know, blatant racism and things like that. But yes, I agree. I think that what we're seeing in this is hints of that time in the movie. Like, that's the way that these kinds of movies were being made, and I think that it's the beginning of the end of that style of film. So it comes at a very good time. I mean, like, that's true for many other reasons, but I think that's really what we're saying, is, like, it hits at just the right time in cinema history for it to kind of be the thing that it becomes.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason why I consider this a masterpiece, part of what a masterpiece is because it has that longevity and it touches and changes the medium. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in my opinion, and I understand that it is my opinion, is the one that set almost the entire language of comic book adaptation going forward in perpetuity.
It is one of the parent films, because it saves it is a year after Batman, so, like, it's important to remember that, right? Like, Batman had already kind of come in and like set the stage for the idea that comic book movies could work. But what Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles does, and we should talk a little bit more about this later after we get through some other details, but it really kind of, it shows that it doesn't have to be Batman to work, which is key, because I don't even think Warner Brothers has even figured that out yet 20 years later, but 30 years later. But yeah, there's something about this movie hitting like it does actually after Batman that actually makes it all the more important. So I think if this had come first before Batman, I think Batman might have fallen on its face a little bit, because I think what works in this movie hits so well, even without the juxtaposition of the idea that Batman was the other comic book movie that was out. Whereas I think Batman would have very much been compared to this, and people would have been very, like, turned off by some of the, like, gothic creepiness and, like, weird adult stuff that happens in the Batman movie. If they had the Mutant Ninja Turtles first, to be like, that one was fun though.
Right, and I actually think that one of the reasons why Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is fun is that it begins filming 2 months after Batman releases. Like this,
and had been worked on for 2 years before Batman had even been released. So
right,
yeah.
But they did have that benefit of seeing Batman.
Oh, it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to create it based on Batman, but once Batman came out, they had time to react, right? To pivot.
They got to look and say, "Oh, you know what didn't really work?
Mm-hmm.
An empty city. An empty city doesn't really work."
Yeah. So, Dev, I wanna point out what I believe might be one of my first marks against this film, and I want to stress these are not deep cuts. When I'm taking these today, it is legitimately, in the true sense of the world, to play devil's advocate. Like, this is just to start conversations because I actually don't
Okay.
I don't feel like these are real big issues with this film.
All right. Before
But
we do that, do we want to do a synopsis
that's
of
my
this film?
first question.
Okay.
Can you tell me the plot of this movie?
Oh, certainly.
In like just a couple of easy to digest sentences, tell me what the plot of this movie is.
A crime wave in the city of New York brings to the surface its greatest protectors that have been waiting in the shadows for their moment to shine for the last 15 years. Along the way, they suffer victories and defeats and learn an important lesson, not just about self, but family and the importance of being a contributing member of your society.
So at what point does the Avenger style farmhouse come in, or the Oliver Twist esque group of kids on like Pleasure Island? Talking like like how do those moments happen in that story?
That's a very good point. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm holding the VHS in my hand, and
Mhm.
this is the VHS that released for $24.99 in 1991, which is
That's
just
cheap.
crazy to me.
That's insanely cheap for a VHS
Yeah,
at that
well, it's
time, isn't it?
FHE. It's Family Home Entertainment,
Mm,
so
yep.
that's like a big thing about that.
Yeah.
And here is this is unfortunately going to support what you just questioned about its plot. Yeah, just a brief synopsis. Now you can catch America's favorite green teens in their first live action blockbuster film. After wading in a puddle of radioactive waste, these radical reptiles are transformed into New York City's greatest crime fighting quartet. Featuring hot new music by MC Hammer, this film will captivate adults and kids alike with the blend of humor, camaraderie, and martial arts action. Don't miss this blockbuster movie. You'll have one shell of a good time. That doesn't tell me anything about the movie.
No.
Maybe you're right. Maybe this is a directionless, plotless movie.
I don't think it's directionless, and I don't even think it's plotless. I think my problem is it's the exact opposite. It is over plotted and over directed. There are things that happen in this movie. It's like there was like five or six treatments for this script, and I don't think that was actually the case for this. Usually we talk about this and it was like, oh, there's like 20 writers, but I don't think that's the case here. It just feels like they were so excited to make a Turtles movie and they didn't want to miss the opportunity to do all of these different things. So you end up with like let me explain to you what I think the plot of this movie is. So you you end up with the local reporter April O'Neil, who has uncovered a story that the recent crime wave may be actually more what's the word I'm looking for? Planned, directed than other people give it credit for, right? Like everybody just thinks it's just these damn kids acting up, and so she goes to dig deeper into it and finds herself caught up in this conspiracy, and she is saved by a mysterious vigilante. In that, we learn that there is a group of vigilante Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that are saving everybody from this what is known as the Foot Clan, who has been leading these kids to do these weird like basic petty crimes like stealing bikes and taking money out of people's purses and stuff like that, right? Um, that is where you get all of the teen stuff. But then deeper than that, you find out that the whole crime wave is actually just a front for Shredder, the main villain of the film, to actually be making child soldiers. He is literally taking these kids and giving them the opportunity to do whatever the hell they want and telling them that basically like the law is meaningless. And then what he's doing is he's taking the most elite of those kids, the ones that are the worst of the worst, and turning them into his own army known as the Foot Clan. And it is from that the turtles decide that they need to step up and lose their mentor, which causes them to need to go find themselves on some weird journey, right? They need to go on a walkabout essentially in upstate New York, and then from that they find their inner ninja. They figure out their abilities, and they come back to take back the city from this child army. And that is what that is the full plot of this movie, right? Like it goes into all of these directions earnestly. It earns the right to tell the story about the kids. It earns the right for them to disappear for 20 minutes off to a different set, right? Like they go to some weird places, but it completely makes sense as you're going. It's only in like retrospect where you're like, what the fuck just happened in that movie?
Okay, so I want to touch on a couple of things. First of all, the Say Report, we're a show about everything, and we're usually kind of directionless ourselves. But this episode right here, if it's not the most pinball, bing bong, ding 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 jackpot episode of the Say Report, I will be very surprised. Because the brief synopsis you just shared, I have so many things I want to touch on.
Mm-hmm.
First being the fact that it takes 5 people to steal one wallet. The Foot Clan is hyper inefficient. So the fact that they're able to empty out that truck in less than 30 seconds, like they'd give Memphis Reigns and his car stealing crew a run for their money. Thank God they're in LA.
You got two different, right? You got two different tiers though, right? Because like the purse snatching is being done by these kids that are just kind of just being, I mean, essentially it's entrapment, right? Like he's telling these kids like laws don't matter, like come do what you want, smoke cigarettes, play video games all day, play pool, play poker, right? And then like also then they end up in this place where, and we see this with Danny, an important character in this film, which is one of the teens that we follow through all of this and ends up becoming friends with the Turtles. And I actually very much love the character of Danny. I have to say, rewatching this film made me realize that he's not much, but he is, for when he's there, he is perfect. Everything about it.
And he only exists in this film. He has never reached into another part of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mythos, and that is crazy to me.
Yeah, we see with him the way that the entrapment works, because he gets kind of like brought into this world, and he it's all fun and games, literally like a Pinocchio-esque Pleasure Island-esque like world that he's being brought into, and then in that he is convinced to just steal some money from your friend, or like, just steal some candy from the store. And then once that happens, they've got him, because they've got that over him, and they push him further and further and further. And he begins to question his own like morality and his own self, to the point with like they're breaking him. It is actually like super insidious to an upsetting level when you really sit back and realize what's going on. And it starts with this dude, Tatis, what's his name?
Tatsu.
Tatsu, thank you. Mixed up my UNS. My dyslexia is popping in. But it starts with Tatsu, and I think that they do a phenomenal like twist with Tatsu, where I every time I watch this movie, I think he is going to be revealed to be Shredder, and then I remember, no, he's just revealed to be like the right-hand man of Shredder.
He's the den mother, really. Like it's so, God, there's so
he's
much on display.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, the kids are not efficient, and then they get to see that, like, but someday you can be this. But then I have issues with, why did they let them smoke if they want to turn them into ninjas? Like, the Cobra Kai is also sort of breeding these child soldiers, but like via discipline, not via anarchy. Like, it's no wonder that 4 15-year-olds are able to wipe out literal dozens of these foot soldiers single-handedly. Mm-hmm. Because they were smoking and playing billiards a couple of weeks before they became soldiers. It makes no sense. The lack of discipline, like, I don't know, I don't understand how it's going to change at all. It's not touched on, and it's one of the parts of this movie that I really scratch my head at.
I have to disagree. It actually come to the defense here. I feel like it really becomes about discipline for those, once they start getting into that fight club, essentially, with Tatsu and him like teaching them that. I feel like that is the time for them to put away childish games. Like, literally, it is that, and it can only happen after they've been broken, right? So like, I understand from like a health and fitness perspective, like, why would you want your trained soldiers to have like lung cancer? Like, that's a whole other conversation, right? Like, but like, historically, there's plenty of examples of these guys that smoke cigars but also are fighters. Like, that's that just happens. I like I don't. There's no argument to that. Like I people have done that. So asking them to like smoke a cigar and like feel like a badass, only for you to like 2 weeks later be like, now put the cigar down. I'm gonna punch you in the face, is like completely understandable to me.
But it's understandable for adults. It doesn't make sense to me as kids, because like smoking as a child can have physical effects on your development. So you're like, I'm going into battle with hindered troops. And I mean, one of the things about the Foot Clan, going like throughout all of Turtle history, and I'm gonna try not to dip into Turtle history, but the fact of the Foot is that they overwhelm you with numbers. Like they don't really care if their soldiers are good or not. They just care that they have the numbers in any fight.
Yeah.
It is quantity over quality. So I can kind of get it,
this.
but
Yeah, let me ask you this then. Like with that in mind and all of this, do you feel that this is the entirety of the Foot Clan? Like this is Shredder's army, or is this just an operation within? Just like one of many things throughout the globe that are just doing this.
in 1990, when this film is created, this is it.
Okay.
There is no greater Foot Clan. That stuff has not been explored yet in the comics. You really see that the Foot existed, and then Hamato Yoshi sort of came to New York and established his own clan of it. And then years and years later, like when after Shredder dies, this is all comic book stuff. So, you know, I said I wasn't gonna, but it's important because of what they have, what the basis is in 1990 for Steve Barron creating this film. And that is, it is after Shredder's death that Karai comes from the Asian branch of the Foot Clan and says, I want to bring these people into order. And because you've created a war zone in New York City by cutting off the head of the snake and not giving them proper leadership. And that's when we see that this is a global group, that the Foot Clan is sort of like an organized crime family in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I guess. No, and that's exactly like the kind of feeling that I have always had about it. So I guess part of the other thing for me is like it doesn't upset me too much the ways that these guys are being treated or trained or anything like that, because it, in a weird way, it's okay if they fail. I mean, like a couple of things to consider. Like, first of all, this is supposed to be the Turtles' first true like outing, right? So there's nobody that they're actually the Foot Clan is actually really thinking they're going to be fighting against, right? Like the worst is going to maybe be like the cops, but they've already kind of made sure that that's not even an issue, right? Because we've learned that they're tied in blackmailing like certain people higher ups, right? So
Are
there's
they?
this.
That's a question that I have that is
That's
never established in the film, but I wonder.
There's or they're at least threatening people into submission or something. Like there's evidence of that at least. But so without the idea of the Turtles, right, and the idea that like you said, the philosophy of the Foot Clan is really just to overwhelm with numbers. It doesn't matter if they win the fight; they just need to. Like as an individual, it's just that as a group, there's just so many of them, it'd be impossible to defeat, right? So there's so much of that idea in that they don't think they need to do any better than what they're doing in the movie. And so I don't know, it never even rubbed me the wrong way that they were doing that, because it's more about this is the exact way you would break a kid into this world. I mean, like it is literally what we know was going on with like gangs at the time.
Yeah.
And that's for good and for ill, because I think a lot of this movie really preys on the fear that people had of LA gangs and the ways in which kids would get involved in violence. I think this movie uses that as a backdrop in a way that, knowing now that there's, you know, as a 30-year-old man, also with the hindsight of 2020, literal, but anyway, but that like there's more nuance to what was going on with the gang violence of the 90s than what we were being told by the media, right? And this movie makes no attempt to nuance it at all. Like this is legitimately like, hey, moms and dads, this is the exact shit you're worried about your kids getting involved in. Like they smoke a cigar one day and the next day they're ripping off little old ladies in electronic stores. Like that. Like there is a definite like play on fear and going on in the plot line of this movie that makes me feel a little gross.
That lack of nuance, though, as much as what you're saying is true, like as an observer, they're sort of preying on it. I feel like that lack of nuance comes from the top, because the whole talk of this is these thefts remind Japanese immigrants to New York City about something that had been happening in Japan. And we know that Hamato Yoshi and Oroku Saki were in Japan, and for some reason Hamato Yoshi had to come to New York. So if he somehow stopped what Oroku Saki was doing in Japan, and then he comes to New York, and then Oroku Saki sitting in Japan sees this fear and this way of indoctrinating, and he's like, I could do that. I can, like, take kids and make them soldiers. I mean, I ran an elite troop in Japan. This is my opportunity in America. Like, that lack of nuance, I think, also comes from how he is running his organization.
Sure, and that's fine, like within
the film. Yeah, I got
within
you.
fiction.
Yeah.
It's just, it is like, as an audience member outside of it, like it, my mom watching this movie in 1990 probably was like, yep, and this is why I'm never taking you to LA. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like there's this idea that it is just perpetrating this idea of, you know, your kids, the second you take eyes off of them, they're gonna start smoking menthols and playing video games, and that's the end of the beginning. Go to the beginning of the end for them, right? Like, and it's too easy for me in that sense, but that is what it is, right? Like, that's one of those things that I've just come to accept about this film. But in that, I don't take any issue with, because like you said, it's within the fiction to do things that way. So like, I take no issue with what they're being asked to do. It's the fact that they're being asked to do it that feels really weird to me.
Right. It also does a pretty good job at showing that a gang is not necessarily the answer. Like, there's a pretty strong anti-join a gang message in this film.
Very, very after school special. Yes. Yeah. With Danny specific. Yeah, no, I don't I don't disagree.
Yeah. Splinter's whole speech about he uses you for what he wants, and Casey Jones being like, you think this is family? This isn't what family is.
Well, and so like, let's talk about like how beautiful that is actually, like, portrayed throughout the film, is the idea that the boy, like the turtles, right?
You call them
the boys.
Yeah,
like,
I'm fine with that.
That they are a family, and like part of what's going on with losing Splinter is not just that they've lost a mentor, but that they've lost a father, right? And the movie does this fantastic job of nailing that, like, home all the time, but never feeling like like there's not like a catchphrase that you hear every 2 seconds, like but we're family. Like, you don't hear that like every, but you get it, you know that, right? And so it has this really great move of being like a gang is promising you a family and safety and something that you're not getting at home, right? And that's unfortunate. But we see an actual, like, made family in the fact that I don't think the turtles were related before, and they definitely weren't related to Splinter before, right? But he takes them in, and they get raised as his sons and all of this. There's this idea that you can have a created family that is healthy and works for you. It's just not it's not what you're doing, kid, is basically like what happens in that moment.
Yeah, shared experiences doesn't necessarily mean shared family, is sort of the thing. And also, I have this, and this is something I definitely want to touch on. Splinter is a good father.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you said child soldiers, I think about, it's very chic right now on the internet to talk about how Splinter raised the turtles to be child soldiers and to, like, get revenge on Oroku Saki.
Yeah, but this movie, I think, it does, like, there's a reason I didn't compare just now Splinter to Shredder, because it's very it's an easy thing to say from the outside, but this movie does a good job of showing literally the point of this movie is to show the differences. You have Shredder, who's taking in all of these kids, taking in hundreds of these kids, treating them like dirt until he breaks them and then making them soldiers, whereas you have Splinter, who actually takes in these kids and cares about them and is able to raise the better ninja.
Yeah. But also, I mean, going back to that, like the term child soldier, it really did ring because I hear it a lot when I'm talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with people.
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, it's not like he trained them to be ninjas because I want them to be able to kill Oroku Saki someday. He did it because it's how he was raised, and that discipline gave him strong respect and like a basis for the world and how to react and live within it. Which, like,
Where
yeah,
so like Shredder very very much raises these kids to believe. I don't know if Shredder believes this or not, because I firmly believe that he is willing to just put these kids up just as like fodder, so for him to do his own shit in the background.
that's the Foot
But
Clan motto, right? Like,
right,
don't
right.
read the literature because you won't sign the membership card.
But he raises the foot soldiers to believe that the art of ninja is just that, an art form, a tool, a weapon to be used, whereas Splinter raises the boys to understand that it's a way of life, right? And like I understand that that's like a super cheesy way of putting it, and to their credit, they don't really say that in the movie, but it is this idea that you learn not just about the body but also the mind, and like you take it on, and it becomes a style, a lifestyle that you live and you bring out into the world. And so it's this idea that it's not just about the weapon, it's not just about the fighting and the power and all that, and that's again what makes them the better ninja. And so I think that in of itself clears Splinter of any sense of like child soldiers, because like you said, he's not raising them to be fighters, to be soldiers. He's raising them just to understand, just it's his only way of really kind of explaining the world to them.
Right. And it's like he didn't ask for them, he found them, and then he's
Mm-hmm.
like, we shared this experience, this exposure to this nuclear goo, this
Mm-hmm.
ooze, and from that, like this shared experience, I feel a weird responsibility for them because they were children and I had lived some
Yeah.
going forward. And that's big. Like, it's like a big thing. But I've never liked that idea that they raised them as child soldiers. And again, I'm dipping into the pool again. But in the first book, which the original Ninja Turtles volume, was a parody comic. It was meant to be a parody of Daredevil, which is hilarious when you consider the foot is meant to be a parody of the hand from Marvel Comics. But like over the years, they've successfully become like not a joke.
Yeah.
Like as they built up the Foot Clan, like no. I believe if the foot and the hand actually fought, it'd be a pretty interesting fight. As long as Elektra and Raphael weren't there throwing size at each other. But yeah, so it's one of those situations where, but in that first book, like they're out and they're kind of just being vigilantes, and then it comes to their attention that Oroku Saki is in New York, and Splinter doesn't send all four of them to fight against Oroku Saki. He sends Raphael because he's like, if it comes down to it, you're the only one I trust to kill somebody right now. Your brothers are not there. You have this anger, and that says to me, if push comes to shove with this dude, you'll do what needs to be done. And that's huge in terms of like, your brothers, like they like doing ninja stuff, right? But you're the actual assassin of the team.
Yeah. Well, it's an argument to be made that it becomes that Raph is the only one that truly understands that there is a dark side to ninja that needs to be embraced and trained rather than ignored. And the other guy, they just don't have that in them, right? The closest might be like Leo, but even then, he is way too Captain America, like true to his heart to ever kind of get there. The way that Raph understands that sometimes you even have to betray yourself in order to get the job done. And again, that is it's a life philosophy. It's that idea of how much are you willing to give in order to maintain a balance of some kind in your life. And sometimes in their lives in particular, that means you gotta kill a dude. And like that's not a good excuse. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that that's like that makes it all okay. But it is at least part of the fiction that is really solid and sticks to it really well.
Yeah. And also this film in particular, right? So you talked about this isn't one of those there were 20 screenwriters situations, and
Hmm.
it wasn't. Steve Barron, the director of this film, sat down with Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird and looked over comics and was like, "This is our script. It's all in these comics. We don't need to do any more of this." And he picked the parts that he wanted, hired a screenwriter to take those and turn it into a screenplay. So that also explains why it feels maybe a little bit directionless, as you said,
Mm.
because it's not like the Turtle comics were not written with any sort of continuity. They were just sort of written as, oh, it's funny because they're giant human turtles and they're fighting crime in New York.
Right.
So, I mean, the biggest one that starts off this film is the Raphael micro series Me, Myself, and I, in which
Where he runs off on his own, right?
yeah, because he almost kills Michelangelo while they're sparring, and he realizes, like, I have this darkness in me, and I don't know what to do with it. And
Hmm.
that's why he goes off and he runs into Casey Jones and they fight in the park. And then he realizes, I'm not alone. I have this kindred spirit in Casey Jones. There are other people who are doing what I'm doing and who understand that, like, it's not just fun and games, lives are on the line.
Yeah. Later, that he also makes that same connection with Batman.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I love Raph. But yeah, the Raph running off on his own storyline is something that becomes so integral to origin TMNT movies that like it becomes the plot of the animated one later. They touch on it in the Michael Bay ones. I mean,
Secret of
like
the
it is
Ooze is him going off with Kino. And
right.
like
Yeah.
we're going to
Yeah.
run our own organization and figure out how the Foot are back. Because we killed Shredder, how are they back?
Yeah, yeah. The lone wolf move from Raphael is like part of the formula for me for a good Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story, right? But yeah, so they use that particular story to kind of kick this off, and it leads to some of the most iconic movie imagery. I mean, Raph in the trench coat, like the whole fight scene with Casey when they first meet, like the fight scene in the subway when he saves April the second time, and is that when he loses his sai, or is
No, he
that
loses
or
his sign in the very opening fight, which
oh
I
no,
would
that's when
like
he
to
gets it
give
back,
the
right?
opening fight some spotlight later on in this, because I noticed some stuff after 30 years watching it with a notebook in my hand that is worth discussing. But you're not wrong about that iconography. Like, when I was making quotes and referencing this film in college, it was a Jose Canseco bat. Tell me you didn't pay money for this.
You didn't pay money for this. I love the you gotta eat crumpets to understand cricket like fight like because he first like he pulls out the hockey stick at first. Casey pulls out the hockey stick at first, and I was like, oh, for some reason I thought it was a cricket bat, and then he pulls out the other bats, and I was like, God, why am I thinking about a cricket bat? And then he pulled out the cricket bat, and I was like, oh yes. And then that line, I just lost my shit last night. Like I was watching this movie, and he says that stupid line, but it hits so good. Now is a good time to point out that Raphael is the only turtle in the movie, also played by their voice actor. And I love it. Like what he is doing and what he's saying character wise. There's such a good like flow between like his banter and his fight style that I think the other ones kind of suffer a bit, and I think it's probably because they're just ADRing in these lines from other actors. It's this is the only guy that's actually like in what he's saying and feeling it. And that fight scene with Casey Jones in the beginning is like a perfect example of that for me.
Yeah. I mean, Josh pays, credit where credit's due. He's the one who's
Hmm.
playing Raphael, voice and body. And yeah, it works on so many levels, the fact that it's it. And it's why I feel Raphael is the main character of this film in a lot of ways. Like,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's that I I could say that I kind of feel that all the time about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. As much as like I love Mikey and Donatello, like they feel very Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to Raphael and Leo having the constant like big brother fights about like who's really in charge, like and I think that in that I focus more on Raph because I mean no secret I am a Batman guy through and through. So like the guy that is like struggling for power, I'm always going to be a bigger fan of that guy going off on his own to like figure his own shit out and his anger and his hatred than I'm ever going to be of like the Superman Captain America type that Leo really falls into, where it's like he really should be like I understand that like Leo really deserves and is capable as a leader, so like it's never a question of I don't think Leo shouldn't be in charge. It's just it's always that like Raph has the potential to be just as capable and to be just as good of a leader. It's just that he gets in his own way, and so that's just a much more interesting character. So it kind of falls to him to always be kind of the protagonist of the story because he's the only one still trying to figure his shit out in a lot of ways.
There's also the big thing that Raphael, he doesn't really need the team, which is it's an important lesson that he learns in this film, where at the end he realizes I do need to rely on my brothers. And then, I mean, we can talk about that Shredder fight too, because I don't necessarily love it. But it's one of those things where, like, Raphael doesn't need to be led because he's a leader. And so it's hard for him to be part of a team. I mean, it really stems from, for me, Cyclops and Wolverine. Leonardo is Cyclops and Raphael is Wolverine. Up and down all day long, which I guess makes April Jean Grey, but now I'm grossed out and throwing up in my mouth. But there's other stuff that I want to talk about there too.
See, in my scenario, she'd be Wonder Woman, but anyway.
Yes, I get it. But also when you're and Leonardo is Superman. Well, I can see it. That does work. But they're mutants, Sejin. So I compare them to other mutants. If they were an alien race like Michael Bay wanted, maybe we could have that discussion. But yeah, it's one of those things where this film, because it leans so heavily into Raphael, I understand why Partners in Crime call him the leader. And another big moment is in the comics, Leonardo Micro Series #1. It's when he fights against the Foot, and it ends with him being thrown into April's apartment above the antique shop. And so that happening to Leonardo in the comics, they're without guidance and they're not sure what to do, which is why they go and lick their wounds in Northampton in the comics, not upstate New York. Because they're literally without leadership at that point. So in this film, where you make that Raphael, where it's Raphael who is put into a coma, and that stops the Turtles in this way that we've seen before in existing literature, you can kind of see why someone who doesn't really know the Turtles outside of this film would look at Raphael and say leader.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that Raphael, whenever he goes out, there's this comfort with being in the outside world that I had never noticed prior to this viewing of the film.
Oh, you mean like him going to the movies to go see like, the New Line Cinema Classic Critters?
It's not just that he was like, I'm going to go see a movie alone, because that's like the lone wolf sort of thing. It's the fact that it's when he's walking across the crosswalk, right? He is not uncomfortable with being on the surface in this way that I feel like the others are. Like Michelangelo isn't up on the sidewalk to get that pizza. He could have just as easily put on like a coat and met the pizza guy at that address and handed him the money.
And it's Secret of the Ooze where we see the whole sewer skateboarding scene, right? Isn't that like the big thing in the like opening when they like basically the way that they first show Mikey is him skateboarding through the sewers? Am I misremembering that?
I mean, that happens as well. There is a scene with that, but also this one features Donatello skateboarding after Raph goes to the movie.
Oh, that's
Donatello
right.
skateboards to meet Michelangelo for the pizza.
but it's that same. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm thinking of. I'll be honest. I watched more than just Ninja Turtles last night. I watched.
That's fine. I watched Commando last night, and if you
I
listen to
watched
the
Ninja
episode,
Turtles, and then I watched Secret of the Ooze.
why would you do that? That's gonna mess your brain up in so many
but
ways.
but both scenes serve the same thing, right? Is in what you're saying, like they feel so at home and so comfortable in their subway sewer situation that they've got, right? The ways in which they can get around. Even the scene when they're leading April back home, and they're jokingly, but they're sniffing their way out, right, to figure out where they are in the city. Like they are clearly super comfortable underground, and we never get to see that from them above ground. Whereas with Raph, it's the opposite in a lot of ways. We see him really out there. The closest we might get is when they're out on their own at the farm. They don't seem to have much of an issue being out there.
But they're 4 miles away from any other people.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's a big, like that moment where she's like, all right, I got to start walking because it's about 4 miles to our nearest neighbor. Like
Yeah.
that establishes why they have no problem being out and not being frightened. And it's
Right.
really the first time that they ever get to do that in their entire 15 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you say that they've been fighting against this whole crime wave that's happening in New York City, but when they save April, that is literally their first battle.
That's
Because
true.
Leonardo
Yeah.
goes to Splinter and says, "We've had our first battle," and it's like, that was the first time you guys ever did this. That's nutso.
Yeah. 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 So on top of what I gave as a plot synopsis earlier, the other part of the story that really kind of starts to muddy things, and again, it works and it comes naturally and all of that. It's just in retrospect, the entire origin story of the Turtles is in this movie too. So it's not just their first fight after training for so long in the sewers. We also learn like their entire backstory about how they came to be, and it ends up being plot significant in the end because it's the same situation in which Shredder it was, I guess, created, would be for lack of a better word, right?
Well, I mean, no, he was so disfigured by Splinter as a little rat scratching up his face that he's like, I'm gonna wear a cheese grater everywhere
For the rest of my
the
life.
rest of my life. No, and I'm gonna quote Darth Vader, unironically.
Yeah, I am your father.
I am your father.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's just another thing that's thrown on top of this film is like they really feel like they need to hit all of these points. Origin story, Raph on his own, them running off to the farm, the child like army that's being created by in this like gang style setting, and then all of that is wrapped up by this story of April O'Neil kind of just like slowly uncovering all of these bits of a story. And I think maybe that's why it works so well for me. I'm saying like literally just realizing this now as we're talking about it is like the through line through all of this movie is April. Like she gets involved in looking after the Foot Clan. She gets saved by the Turtles. It is her being saved by them a second time that leads to Splinter telling the origin story. She owns the house that they run off to as a way to hide out for a bit. Like she does a lot of fucking work as a character, and nails it. Like really, really nails it. I love April in these movies, and it's Judith
Judith Hogue. I mean, and
Judith
there's a
Hogue.
reason why it's starring Judith Hogue. Because for as much as I say Raphael is the main character is April O'Neil. Where she's the one who's telling the story in the beginning about the crime wave that is happening. If she were not attacked, the Turtles would not have been there to save her and run into her. She is the driving force of this film.
My favorite prop in the whole movie is the sketches of hers of the Turtles in various situations, Donnie in the car and Leo on the chair and stuff.
My favorite part of the film and my favorite aborted plot line of the film are those sketches, because they were supposed to be such a bigger deal to the movie. Like that's part of what makes Casey fall in love with her, is seeing a drawing that she did of him. Like that's like a moment there. And also the end of the film was supposed to be her and Danny pitching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as a comic book series, using those drawings.
That's rad. That's dumb. I love it. But yeah, like specifically the one of I think it's Leo watching over Raph in the
In the
tub. So
tub,
like Leo's
yeah.
like passed out on the chair is like again iconic to me. Like when I think about this movie, it is one of the first images that pops into my head. And when I think about like just cool movie props, it's one of the first things that pops into my head. But yeah, so April just does she does some work as this main character, and she makes all of this that I've been talking about with like the plot being kind of wibbly wobbly, like she ties it all together. So like it becomes completely feasible for me as a plot line. As much as it might meander, I think it is still purposeful in its meandering, which I think is kind of an oxymoron. But there's this sense that I get why we're here every second of this movie. So it works. It's weird, but it works.
Yeah. I can't disagree because you're 100% correct. April O'Neil is the driving force of the film. And she's also a reporter, and reporters track down leads, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't work out. And that's where the meandering sort of happens. Is she's like, well, I'm tracking down this lead. I'm getting interviewed on my own news network. I don't get that scene. That's the one scene that doesn't really work for me. Is like, is it normal for like TV news broadcasts to interview one of their reporters?
It's
like
it actually is. I think of like, but what you normally have is the reporter is usually out in the field, and they've been out there like talking to people all day and all of that. So the way that the interview, quote unquote, is conducted is you have the one at the desk talking to the one that's out in the field and just asking some basic questions, and that happens. It makes it weird that she's just there in the office, because at that point the question becomes, why is she just not telling the story?
Well, because she's
like
not an anchor, right? Like you think of it that way. She's not an anchor. She is a reporter.
But again, 60 Minutes or I mean, if you watch like Rachel Maddow or any of that like sort of stuff, if there is somebody that's been working on a story for them and they're in office, they'll just tell you what's going on.
Yeah,
it's that in the field like interview that it felt more like.
Yeah, it's very strange. Like that moment, I'm like, this is never not sat wrong with me. Yeah, that she's like, she's not dressed up particularly nice either. It's like she's just wearing her reporter clothes, but they're like, we're gonna do this one at the desk, and it's okay.
Yeah, the part of it for me that doesn't work is that her producer, who has been riding her ass to try and drop the story, and we find it's because he's been getting pressured from the Foot Clan somewhere along the line, right?
He's getting pressured by the chief of police. And I think it's just because the chief of police doesn't like that this reporter is calling him out for doing a bad job. I wish that there was just like the one scene that showed Shredder had something on Stearns.
On the
police
chief. Yeah. But so what's weird about this scene is she is there, she's in office, she's clearly underprepared. Let's put it that way. I'm not gonna like make fun of this woman's like outfit.
No, I'm not making fun of that. She's not wearing the thing that you expect to see a news anchor in.
Yeah, she looks like she just ran on the door and sat down in this chair and started telling the story to the camera.
She's wearing a blouse.
Right?
She's wearing a floral blouse.
So there's this idea that she's underprepared, but she's in office. Her producer clearly did not give the okay for this story to go forward, because we then see him like pissed off and not even stopping the show. He's just like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. And it's like, bud, you should probably stop it from happening. You're the boss.
Yeah, you could have said, we're not going to interview April on the series.
Yeah, or the second she sat down unexpectedly, because clearly that's what happened, you cut the feed, because like that is like unacceptable. Yeah.
Cut the commercial.
There's just a weird, it's just a real weird like moment where it's an excuse to push story along, because she needs to be seen giving that interview, because it's what pisses off the Foot Clan more to the point where they attack her again.
No, it's not even that, because that's like, is that no, that's not silence her. Like that's silence her is when she's in the interviewing the police chief. That's when they're like, we have to silence her. That's when Shredder's like, silence her, and then Raphael saves her. It is after Raphael has saved her and they're at her apartment that she's being interviewed. I guess because she survived the mugging with the Foot Clan? Like,
Well,
because they're not.
and still talking about it, and
Yeah.
I feel like that is what then leads to them attacking her apartment, right?
They attack her apartment because Danny tells them that they're there.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah,
It's not related to her. It's all related to the turtles.
Yeah.
It's very strange because it's like, and what we've just determined, what you've just determined for me is that it is strange because I understand how television is made because I have that knowledge.
Yeah.
Like, no, if you don't want this to happen, Charles, you can do that. Like, I understand that you like April, and I've often wondered watching this film how much he likes April, because they're very familiar with each other.
I gotta say, I thought I remembered him being much more lecherous in past viewings of this movie. He did not come across that way at all as I watched it this time, but for some reason I remembered him being very much like I control your story, you know, like, and that's not at all what it is.
No, that
like,
doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
But
so
he does barge into her apartment though, so I can understand that memory existing in your mind. Like, she's in a bathrobe and he barges into her apartment. For memory's sake, I can see that becoming, this dude's a fucking creep.
Yeah,
because he's not giving her space at all. Like, and also her joke about, I don't want you to see my unsightly bathtub ring. Her bathtub is filthy. Your bathtub is filthy, April. How old are you? How old is April O'Neil? That's a question that I have.
Yeah. No, I imagine young 20s, right? Like she's a young upstart reporter, right? Like she can't be more than like 24, I bet.
Yeah, because if she's 30, it's weird. It's weird that she's hanging out with these 15-year-olds. Yeah. Like, and not in like a gross way, just the fact that watching the film, I'm like, so she kind of becomes a surrogate mother to them in a way that I'm not hyper comfortable with. As I sit here with notepad and paper, I'm like, this is weird. Notepad and paper. I had a pen too. I didn't just have two things of paper. You can't write on paper with paper.
All of these notes.
It's crazy. That's when the 24 pages is impressive. No, it's one of those things where, like, without their leader, they kind of lean on April, and she takes him in, and she helps him in this way that is sort of motherly, but then also something that is not explored enough in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the fact that they're teenagers with budding sexual identities. Yep, that's something that I just said. Kind of grossed out that I just said it. And there is like that moment where, like, oh, she thanked you, Raph, and they're like kind of jeering him for the fact that she might have a crush on him. And Mikey obviously has a crush on her with the kiss in the TV and the, she called me Mikey. Like, yeah. Like, it's one of these situations where, like, is she supposed to be provider to them? Is she supposed to be object of attraction? The only one who doesn't really have that moment with her in this film is Donatello, which is hyper strange when you consider that down the line, it is Donatello who is like the one who's into April.
I am getting all sorts of different ages for April depending on what version you're talking about, because like the Nickelodeon show just straight up makes her the same age as them, 16.
Yep.
But the rest implies that she is in her 20s, and I mean, like, I've always thought of it as more like the older neighbor, like babysitter relationship, and maybe that's just something that I just have the experience of. But
I had that too, so you're not alone.
Right. So it's that idea that she's the older female. She is one of the first female influences in their life. In general,
she is the very first female influence in their life.
Right. And so like them being teenage boys and over hormonal, getting attracted to this beautiful woman that is not related to them in any way makes total sense. Like, in terms of like seeing her as a mother, I don't know if they ever really do. Like, she never scolds them. There's never a point at which she has to like be the authoritarian with them, right? She just is always just making sure that like they're fed and making sure that they are getting in the car and buckling in before they go, like that sort of thing, you know?
I guess it's just the splinter, like when he's missing, and that
Yeah.
like we need you to soothe this hellacious wound for us.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong. She never does that other part of mothering.
Right.
You're right about that. And I mean, then later on down the line, that would make Casey Jones the parental figure. And no, Casey Jones is Raphael's Fonzie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's the babysitter's boyfriend that shows up, and he's the cool dude that lets you take a sip of his beer, and he, you know what I mean? Like there's very much a familial sense to Casey and April being part of the family with them, but so I can kind of get where you'd go with with a mother figure, because we don't have many other female like older figures in family dynamics often, but like maybe like the cool aunt, like.
Yeah, it's something that, first of all, I always commend this film for exploring that. A lot of the times when it's explored, there's like that one episode in the '87 cartoon series, Raphael Meets His Match, where he meets Mona Lisa, and like he kind of like explores those ideas in a way. Not big because it's a kid's show, but like you kind of have that, oh, this is a female mutant, and like she seems to be flirting with Raphael, and he's kind of flirting back, but also crazy stuff is happening, guys. It's not time to do that. And then like in the books, when they become older, and because the comic books, like they've aged them to all levels of Ninja Turtle ages. Like Leonardo is engaged in a relationship with a woman superhero who actually has like Superman-esque powers. Radical is her name, and that makes sense. And Michelangelo like dates aliens. So it's something we see when they're adults and have like moved past the like pubescent situation. Yeah. So I do like that it's at least touched on in this film, that they highlight the teenage part of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Especially, they've never met a woman before. Yeah. So, like... So that's also why I say Splinter's a good dad, because they're very respectful of a woman the first time that they meet a woman.
Yeah, there's definitely some there's definitely some cringy stuff with like the ways in which they just quickly like immediately are just like, we're in love. But part of that is a cringiness of teenage boys suck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, being a teenage boy sucks.
Yeah.
That's something we can both talk on with some authority.
Yeah. So like there is some weirdness there in watching the movie now, again, as like a 33-year-old man, just being like, man, was I ever like that? Cringe is definitely part of it. But yeah, I love April in these movies, and in this movie in particular. I think that like they do such a good job like using her to keep the movie on its tracks, right?
Yes. So now let's talk about Casey Jones. Because I feel like Casey Jones is that thing that you were touching on earlier about maybe toxic masculinity a little bit.
Yeah. There's some stuff that happens with Casey, and specifically lines that Casey has that get really kind of don't age well, right? And I think part of it is, again, his character and who he is in the world of film, who he is in the world of the story. Like that kind of character is something that we just don't hold up anymore, right? It used to be this thing that we held up as the cool, like badass character that is possibly by the end of this series going to be the one that like turns evil or gets killed, right? like there's something dangerous and dark about him, and in a lot of ways I guess it's to juxtapose like Raph, and like how Raph is actually not as far gone as he thinks he is, because like Casey is a little bit further than him always. I don't know. It's so hard for me because I love Casey Jones. I think Casey Jones might be like, besides like Usagi Yojimbo, like who isn't technically in this universe but like comes over to this universe from time to time, I think Casey is probably my favorite like character. And I love those characters. We've talked before about like my love of the guys like Jim Gordon or Phil Coulson in the Marvel universe. Like the guy that is just trying to like stand up with the gods to just put his fucking foot down as a human, like is very much an appealing story for me. And so that is Casey in these stories. And I I know that with that character archetype, there are pitfalls that they could fall into. And so I guess I will say that, like, I think the movie does a good job of not falling into all of them.
I think here's an interesting thing, right? I read an article recently about how Tony Stark in the MCU is not a good dude.
Mhm.
That like he wouldn't survive the Me Too movement. He's a jerk, right? He's like a lecherous kind of jerk.
Yes.
Casey Jones is never as bad as Tony Stark. And like that's just a start point for me in terms of like, yeah, he makes comments to April, like, and he's not very sensitive and stuff like that. But I don't think that he's overly like malicious or trying to tear her down. It's just it's that
never.
situation of like I don't know how to act with women because everything that I've seen tells me that this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. In this movie it's Elias Cody's, right?
Yeah.
Cody.
It's well, it's Elias Codius the two times that he's live action. And well, Stephen Amell.
Yes.
Fuck Out of the Shadows.
No. Out of the Shadows is at least, you have to admit, it's at least the better of the two late Michael Bay ones, right? But
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
But I was going to say that one of the things is that, like, where I think Elias Codius, I think the only flaw that Casey has in this movie is the one of time, and the idea being that he is of a time. So what you then get with Steve Amell 5 years ago at this point,
is 2016, so 4. Jesus
right.
Christ.
So you have the benefit of that same character, but with like the knowledge of like how to, be a little bit more timeless in your sensibilities and your humor. So I think that you end up with like a really, really good Casey Jones with Stephen Amell, not just because it's Stephen Amell playing him, but I also think that like you get a really good like sense of who Casey is with Stephen Amell, while at the same time not having him feel cringy or offensive in weird moments. Because like the perfect example of this, and really I think the worst and only true example of Casey's not working for me in this movie, has to be the weird fucking gay panic line when they call him claustrophobic, and he's just like, I've never even looked at another dude. Like, what is that joke? Like,
that joke is stupid. That joke is stupid on
so
many. First of all, how is he more comfortable in that tiny truck cab than in the open lair? Like, it's not claustrophobia, it's that one where like you're afraid of not being able to see. It's reverse agoraphobia.
Yeah, but also the only thing he could have thought he was being called was homophobic, which he then does.
Which then he is homophobic. Yeah.
Right. Which right. So like the joke really should have been like I love all people. like what? Like that would have been a much better punchline, and one that didn't also make him out to be like a weird jerk like 25 years, 30 years later.
I mean, the other thing is that whole scene, one of them should definitely have slept upstairs in the truck.
Well, like, how does he get all the way down there through the sewer? Like, it's not like they just, it's weird.
He's fine with everything, and then he gets there and he's like, oh, but it's like, I'm gonna go keep watch up top. Like, that's all he has to say. And then like, oh, you uncomfortable down here? He's like, yeah, a little bit. It smells like shit.
Smells like shit and moldy pizza.
Yeah.
So like,
which also, fuck you, Danny. I had some pizza a couple of days ago. You have half a pizza that you don't finish as a homeless kid living in a sewer lair? Talk about privilege.
Oh, man.
Sorry. That bothers me every time that, like, there's that much leftover pizza. Yeah. Like, what? And you never got hungry again? I ate once 3 days ago. I'm fine. But yeah, that is... All right, good. I'm glad that that's the line that really sticks out to you, because I'm
his
just
relationship with April and specifically their time at the house is one of those things that it's a dynamic that is an acquired taste, like the hate fuck like relationship that is clearly being built between the two of them is again it's an acquired taste, but I don't think it's necessarily one that's offensive. You
yeah,
know what I
I
mean?
don't think it's offensive either. But it's one of those things where I'm like, how has this aged? And then the claustrophobic line happened, and I'm like, I mean, that's worse. That's the worst line. And it also doesn't make sense with anything else that happened before this or anything that he does after this. What I will say is, we've talked about, Elias Codius, and we've talked about Stephen Amell. There's a Casey Jones in the middle. And while he might not be portrayed by a live action actor, I think that that's the worst Casey Jones.
Oh, okay.
Cause like he doesn't have a job. He's like aimless. Like
The
it's
the movie, the
the
TMNT one,
TMNT
right?
from
The Nickelodeon
2007.
TMNT.
Not
Who played him
Nickelodeon.
in
No
that?
Nickelodeon.
I thought Nickelodeon
Nope.
was a
Nope.
producer on that.
No, Nickelodeon didn't get involved until 2014. 2007 was just by Imaji Films, the same people who did 300. The reason I saw 300 was as like a predecessor to get excited for TMNT, which I saw 4 times in theaters the
Oh,
day it came out.
I forgot. You know who plays him?
Chris Evans? I'm
It's
fully
Chris
aware
Evans.
that is Chris
Chris
Evans.
Evans.
But like he's rude to April, and like at this point they've been in a relationship for like 10 years.
Mm.
And like he has no prospects. Like he's nice to Raph, but like in terms of being a guy, like a male character, he does that, and he's nowhere near as capable as Elias Codius portrays Casey Jones in this film. Like Casey solves so many things in this movie. He's a
Yeah.
capable fighter. He takes down Tatsu. Like he does a lot. He fights off Foot Clan.
He gets the kill at the end of this movie, which is important because it couldn't go to the turtles.
Right.
But it's exactly that thing that, like I was saying, like Casey is that character that is allowed to kind of go over the line so that Raph never has to in a lot of these stories, right? And so yeah, so at the end of this movie, he straight up gets like
Oops.
the most upsetting kill in like my young movie history. Like
Yeah, I mean it still hits me the wrong way that he just goes oops and crushes a dude. But it happens. It's the thing. I mean, the Shredders murdered a bunch of people and did just try to murder the turtles. Not that
it's
it's
okay, 'cause we learned that it
justifiable.
didn't work anyway. So
Yeah, they make it work out, I guess. But yeah, it's and then Casey is not in the second movie because he's too extreme for the happy, healthy Ninja Turtles that show up in Secret of the Ooze.
still
Which
shows up in 3 though, I think.
he
Doesn't
does show up in 3 because they're like, what didn't work in the second movie? Oh, no Casey Jones. That bothered people. I mean, Casey Jones, he is supposed to just be a person fueled by 70s action films who wants to fight.
Yeah.
Which is why in the 87 series, he's a Clint Eastwood impersonator. And that makes no sense. Like, there's one, they like, we'll get you a job in this office building so you can figure out what's going on. And he shows up to the job in his hockey mask. And it's like, you're not going to get hired, Casey Jones. Why do we hang out with you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that kind of like I had never really appreciated until like later years of watching this movie is just because you talked about how Casey is fueled kind of by these like old action movies, and that's definitely true for his character, but how much of this movie is really fueled by like the old like ninja movies of like the 70s and 80s,
Oh, yeah.
or even
definitely.
going back to like the 60s, where like you have like the Bruce Lee ones like Enter the Dragon and stuff like that, or Game of Death, but you also have like Chuck Norris doing like the Octagon, or like Lady Ninja, and like all of these really great like old school like ninja films that to this movie's credit they are just meandering, aimless movies that are just excuses for like chase scenes and fight scenes. And like sometimes they don't even get to those. Like I mentioned the Octagon, and I think famously that is like this like really upsetting film to watch because I think there's only like one fight scene in the entire movie. And like Chuck Norris is an amazing actual fighter. No matter what I feel about the dude personally, politics and all that nonsense, like he is a very well trained fighter, was trained by Bruce Lee. So to be in a movie that then there's only one fight scene and is like pisses me off. But anyway, you lost your shit about The Godfather. I got to lose my
No,
shit
it's
about
fine.
Octagon with Chuck
Yours
Norris.
is a lot more related to it. Though, I mean, organized crime. Just gonna
Yeah.
say it. Just gonna
Yeah.
say. Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that it is. Steve Barron knew the genre and knew that, like, these comics are spoofing this existing sort of genre stuff. I want to sort of pay homage to that in the film version of them. I want it to reflect what is happening in the comics, and they do a really good job of that.
I mean, I think it even feeds. I mean, it definitely feeds the choreography, which
Oh,
we
yeah.
haven't really talked about it. But like, there's actually some legitimately good choreography, especially when you consider the fucking suit situation. Like the fight scenes that actually take place in this movie, and the ways in which the guys in these suits, which we should give a shout out to the other three while we're at it. Josh Pius is as Raph, but it's Leif Tilden as Donatello. I have this written down. Hold on.
Yep.
Michael Sisti,
Michael Sisti is
Michelin Sisti.
Yeah, Michelin Sisti is Michelangelo.
And then the last one is
Don Farden, I think.
David Foreman.
Yeah. Okay.
Did I say that one?
No, you didn't. David Foreman. You said Leif Tilden.
David Foreman.
Yeah.
All of these guys phenomenal in these suits and in the fight scenes and the choreography. Like the flips, the kicks, all of this stuff that they're able to pull off is just. And knowing now in retrospect that it was like a nightmare to be in these suits is just awesome. And so you get that comes from the ninja film, the kind of like meandering just excuses for us to just go up against large groups of ninja, like that actually very much is of the genre. I mean, like Game of Death famously like edited to fucking hell, like against Bruce Lee's like dying wishes, but mainly just to get more fights in and less story. There's also the idea that the special effects, like the weird stuff that goes on with like the costume work in this movie and bleeding Splinter and like all of that sort of stuff, that also very much comes from like the old ninja movies where they would have, you know, these scenes where like hands would get cut off and things like that. There was a lot in this movie that felt very reminiscent of that old like ninja style film, and I had never really thought about that before, but it is actually a very good ninja movie.
Yeah, it's a good like kung fu flick. Like it hits on everything that it needs to hit on to be good. Also, shout out to this being Jim Henson's last like thing that he worked on.
Right.
Before he passed away.
Like after it came out or before it came out?
About a month after it released.
After. Yeah,
so and he didn't like the violence, but like I look at the violence and it's like, this isn't violence. This is like, you want to see violence, wait 2 years when Sally Menke is editing Reservoir Dogs instead of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I will say that is probably something more to talk about with like 2, right? Yeah. And basically the dialing back that you see in 2, it really I think gets sparked by that idea that Henson just really didn't enjoy like his work being used for such a violent film. But that being said, one of his most beloved works, and I don't think and they don't ignore this franchise at all. In fact, one of the dudes that we mentioned, I think Michelin Sisti, I might be misremembering which one it is, but one of them ends up becoming like a main Muppet actor and still works with them to this day, has been in like all the latest like Muppet movies and stuff like that. So like they don't the Henson Company has not like ignored this film. It is not the bastard stepchild of the Henson Company.
No, not at all.
But I think it is a very notable quote from him that he was unhappy with his work being involved with something that had so much violence, and it's what leads to Secret of the Ooze being lame.
Yeah, right. Well, the worst part is that by doing this episode, like I know that at some point we're gonna do Secret of the Ooze. And I'm not excited to rewatch Secret of the Ooze.
I like Secret of the Ooze.
The real disappointing is that we're going to watch Turtle in Time. But, oh my God, Turtles in Time, now, knowing what I know about Ninja Turtles, the franchise,
Yeah.
has so many great like deep cuts to the comics
Yeah, yeah.
that
Well, I mean, just the mere storyline of them traveling back to ancient Asia is like this idea that at the time was ridiculous, but anybody that knew anything about the comics was like, no, 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 this is good. That is a good choice.
yeah,
Um,
this is
but
exactly what should. Why haven't they time traveled before? They
I
did
will
it
say
in the
Secret
eighth
of the
volume
Yeah. I will say Secret of the
issue.
Ooze has the benefit for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, of because it was the less violent film, it was the one that was on TV more often. It was the one that was shown at parties more often. In school, when there was like a free day and we needed to put a movie on, Secret of the Ooze would be one of the movies that would come up in rotation, right? So like it, because of the fact that it is not as violent as the first movie, despite the fact that, like you said, this one's not that violent, it becomes the one with the most exposure throughout my entire life. And I'm sure that that's like where a lot of my acceptance and okayness with the fact that I know that it is not the superior Turtles movie, especially not in the larger oeuvre of what is now the Turtles franchise. But at the time, it was definitely not as good as the first movie. But it didn't matter. That was the one that we just saw more often.
Yeah, I didn't see that film until I had my adenoids removed and was like stuck in bed, and someone let me like dropped it off for me to watch, and I'm like, I don't like this. And I still don't like it to this day. Like I saw Turtles in Time twice in theaters, and that's because I was a kid, and Michelangelo riding a horse backwards is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dip more into those because we're also going to do that. Like that's the thing. When we're 30 years on from Secret of the Ooze and Turtles in Time, we're going to talk about them. And that's exciting, I guess, because it's exciting, but it's not this one. See, the issue is looking at the three movies. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990 is the best balance of the comics and the cartoon. And then Secret of the Ooze really leans into them as their cartoon counterparts. They're more
Yeah.
goofy. They don't really use their weapons. And then you get to Turtles in Time, and it leans real heavily into the comic book plot lines, but still with like family friendly turtles.
Yeah.
So this one, it's like, we're not making an adaptation of the cartoon. We're making an adaptation of the comics. This is for adults. This is for the people who spend money to see movies.
Yeah, but like you said, it's a balance. At the same
Yeah.
time, they also figure out that they also need to kind of still pay respect to this crazy like hit that they're playing with, because by this point you already have the TV show and the toys out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then yeah, that's why they all have the different colors, because
Right.
the colors were an invention of the TV of the
Show.
cartoon.
Yeah, yeah.
It's why it's not hyper violent. Like they use their weapons, which impresses me, but it's not hyper violent. I think it's the reason why you have a character like Danny is to appeal to the kids who might be in the audience.
Right.
Like for adults, they probably wouldn't need that character, but it's to give the kids that someone on screen that they can relate to. And like, it's no secret that the reason that you and I are relating to April and Casey is because now we're closer in age to them than to someone like Danny.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And also Casey, God, Casey Jones, I didn't realize just how much like I get it. I understand. Because he has that thing where he's like, yeah, I played in the professionals until I got hurt, and like I was playing hockey and loving hockey, and then I broke my ankle. I haven't played hockey since. So like I get that, not the same level. Playing in the pros is way different from playing on my high school hockey team, but like I finally got the chance at varsity my senior year because the guy who hated my father was no longer the coach, because he became the principal and didn't have the time to coach the hockey team. So they're like, yeah, we'll move you up. And then I fell down the stairs and broke my ankle, and I haven't played hockey since. And like, oh God, like that's a whole plot line for Casey Jones.
Yeah.
Is like,
Yeah.
I stopped being able to do what I did, and now I just have to put that energy somewhere.
Yeah. I
Sorry.
think no. I mean, like we're getting towards the end of this thing, and it's just I think that what it really is what maybe constitutes this movie as a masterpiece is the idea that it is definitely a movie that with age becomes better in new ways, and rather than it being this thing of like going back and seeing something cringy in the 90s, right? Like you said, this is not the kind of movie that you go to see to go make fun of. Like, as much as there is a goofiness to this film, it is one that they are in on, right? Like, they know that there's a goofiness, and they know that there's a goofiness, and so they acknowledge that, but at the same time they're also like, we're also just going to make a good movie. It's the same thing we talk about with something with good satire, right? Like, and which is, I guess, makes sense considering what these guys started out in life as. But it's the same thing when we talk about Shaun of the Dead, or
Hot Fuzz.
even Hot Fuzz, or I was trying to think of somebody other than Edgar Wright. But
Oh, okay.
but like when we go back to movies like Airplane, and the reason why those are still funny, right, it is because there's this idea of like there's also a respect for the genre and a respect for the audience that it, unlike we did a time capsule a while back on Scary Movie,
That was a
and
very
felt
special episode, but you're not
oh,
wrong. Yeah.
but right, and we noted in that there seemed to be kind of like a disrespect for anybody wanting to actually enjoy themselves with it, right? Like, whereas this very much wants you to be there, wants you to be along for the ride, and in that it's warm and fuzzy still. It works for me. It's still like it's like putting on that Christmas sweater.
I like that Christmas sweater analogy. I'd like to touch on something that I mentioned briefly, and that's Sam Rockwell.
Mhm.
So Sam Rockwell's in this movie. He sort of plays like, to me, he was always kind of management in the Foot Clan.
Yeah,
Like he's
am
the
I
concierge.
he definitely, yeah, well, and for the audience, he is like the introduction to what's going on with the kids. Like, he is the guy that feeds you all the exposition about exactly what you need to know about the, as I said, the Oliver Twist-esque band of children.
Yeah. But the first thing that I recognized after 30 years of this film is he is present
He's in the first scene.
He's in the first scene. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay. So then that brings all sorts of other layers to this film for me that I was watching through. Like, so he is arrested for trying to rob the Channel 3 news van.
Yep.
But 3 days later, he is in that warehouse as like the concierge introducing the latest group of rapscallions.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
And then at the end of the movie, we get to see him be the one that chooses to walk away, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's in a weird way like the moral arc for like the entire group of kids. We get in this one character with Sam Rockwell.
yeah, it's really, I mean, and at that time, he kind of looks like he's the third guy in charge. So, like, it falls to him, like, do you want to be like these assholes, or do you want to go your own way and see Fleetwood Mac with me? And they're like, okay, Casey Jones, let's go. Like, that's the other thing, is that Casey Jones sort of becomes, like, their weird leader. Like, they're following him, and he's like, no, I'm not your Pied Piper. Get the hell away from me. But it's this thing, I never realized that he was in that opening scene, and that, like, what they're doing, their vigilante justice, the Turtles, it's not sticking. He's not still in jail. And then that makes me wonder that same thing. Like, one scene is all I need to see that, like, Shredder has something on Stearns. Yeah. Or, like, Stearns is part of that in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I part of it, though, also comes down to the idea that, for me, what it says is that this is going to sound gross, and I don't mean this in any nice way, but the intelligence on display from Shredder and Tetsu in using kids, like the idea that they can get arrested, but like if they're just kids fucking around, they're more likely to just be able to just get out of it, whether it's like a slap on the wrist and go home, or you have a probation officer now, okay, I'm gonna go home now. Like, it's 3 days later, it's more than enough time for him to have been processed and for them to figure out something to do with him other than put him in jail, which like could be a commentary on like the failing of the system, or like the idea that these guys are using the idea that they're kids to their advantage because they can get away with more shit. And there's a lot going on there to think about, the idea that we watch one of them literally get arrested one day and is out the next, like just doing it again.
Right. And he's not just arrested. Like, April O'Neil is an eyewitness and there when the cops show up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these people tried to rob. But also, I don't know how young he is. Like, he seems like an adult. Like, that's why, like, the age groups of the child soldiers, the Fagans gang of the Foot Clan, like, there are ones who are obviously very young. Like, Danny, I don't think is not a juvenile. But I've always looked at Sam Rockwell as probably older than 18.
I'm gonna check his age right now.
Okay. I mean, the character, I mean, it depends on how old Sam Rockwell is at the time. Like, that's sort of what I would go off of for Judith Hogue.
So that was 89?
1990.
1990?
Yeah.
So he would have been 32. Nope, sorry, 22. 22 at the time that he made that he was in this movie.
Yeah.
So, like, you're not wrong. Over the age of 18, for sure. So there is also a sense of that.
Yeah. How old was Judith Hogue and Elias? I'm just curious on those. I mean, yeah. It's sorry to ask that. It's just like, since we did it for Sam Rockwell, I'm curious.
Digging into Judith Hogue.
Ninja Turtles.
Vamp.
Vamping. I'm vamping. I'm trying to vamp. You can't tell me to vamp when I'm trying to vamp. I mean, it's one of those situations where, like, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Same age.
Same age? Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect. I'm fine with them being, like, 21, so they can buy beer for the Turtles if it comes down to that.
Oh, God.
Elias is in his 30s.
Yeah,
like, he has to be. He
he's
looked like an adult
29.
in Some Kind of Wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, he's 29 by the time this movie's out.
Yeah, and that makes sense too because he is supposed to be the older, like, cooler dude. Like Fonzie, I've been thinking about Fonzie a lot lately. He's not cool. He lives in Richie Cunningham's garage.
I think that's kind of the point of his character, though,
I know,
Dave, right?
I do. Like, I think the same thing. But then people get mad at me, like, why are you judging his living situation? I'm like, I'm not. I'm just trying to say that, like, Fonzie, I wonder if Casey Jones is homeless in this movie. Hardcore. I wonder that.
I don't think that would be a surprise if they revealed that at any point that he was living in his truck and just living this life. I think that would be completely in character. But I mean, all it is that you're pointing out that it's the character, it's an archetype to have the character that as kids we see as the cool one that we learn when we grow up is not the one you want to be, right? It's the same thing with like even Sean Hunter to a point in Boy Meets World or in like That 70s Show you have Hyde and there's all of these weird characters that when we were kids we were like, oh man, it's so rad that he doesn't have to worry about a mom and dad, and then you grow up and you're like, oh, that kid grew up an orphan. Like
that's sad. That's sad that Hyde had to live with the Foremans and that like Red treating him like a child meant something to him. Like that's a hard episode of the 70s show. Yeah, and then finding, what was it, Tommy Chong as a parental figure as well. God, 70. Let's not talk about Hyde though, because unfortunately, Danny Masterson, I can't watch anything that he did or does anymore.
No. Yeah,
it's sad because I liked Men at Work on TBS. So the last thing I want to say, because I give a lot of credit to TMNT personally, and specifically that's why I say the comic book film, not the superhero film. And I think superhero films took a while to realize we need to not look at these as not comic books and learn the lessons of something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where like the cameos that are on display in this film, it's brilliant. It's brilliant that all of the turtles appear outside of costume at some point. I feel bad for Leif Tilden because he's still wearing a mask as the foot messenger who slaps April across the face. Yeah. But like that's a thing that like that was ahead of its time, having that cool cameo. And Eastman and Laird, those are their names. I messed up because of the warehouse is the East Warehouse on Lairdman Island. But Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman, they were originally going to be the people who were driving that garbage truck. Yeah. And you see them get out and run away, but like it's nothing more than that. but that's because there's in the third issue they have a very similar cameo where they're garbage men.
Nice.
So like it's this thing where like this weird language of comic book adaptation cinema starts with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And yes, if Batman didn't hit, we wouldn't have things like Dick Tracy or even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, though this is an independent film, no studio wanted to touch this movie. And it was the highest grossing independent film until Blair Witch came along.
Yeah, almost 10 years later. That's like, how crazy is that? Like it for 10 years, it was the gold star standard for indie success.
Yeah. Not indie, more independent. It wasn't the hip, cool indie thing.
That's true.
That didn't really come into existence until 2003 in Napoleon Dynamite. I'll call it out. I don't mind. But yeah, it's just one of those situations where like this... It sets so many things in. Like, we wouldn't have a Spawn movie if it weren't for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We wouldn't have a Mask movie if it weren't for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
We wouldn't have Marvel eventually dipping back in and doing Blade. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they were gun shy after what happened with Howard the Duck, but like then they lived in a world in which Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles got a 3-movie franchise, a successful 3-movie franchise, and like and suddenly you get things like the Blade franchise and stuff.
And you look at the Blade franchise, and probably why Marvel we see continued success. Blade is not one of those, you know, tentpole marquee heroes in the Marvel universe.
Right.
So that first Blade film, as we've discussed on this show, it's more of a comic book adaptation than a superhero adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
So it deals a lot in that world where we see something like Hellboy eventually exist.
Yep.
And like this film, like I joke a lot about it meaning so much to me, but it's true. Like, I make those jokes because I don't like to wear that much on my sleeve. I don't want the Green Goblin to come and take away Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, knowing full well that it would be hard for me to choose between the Roosevelt Island tram and a copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It wouldn't be. I can get another copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I will save the people. I'm just saying that, like, this is something that, like, I don't want to wear my love for this movie, like, too proudly, because I don't want someone to use it to hurt me.
Yeah, I know. I know. And it's that case that we have run into a few times in the past where everybody seems to have an enjoyment of this thing, but we're all too afraid to talk about it for that exact reason. And we shouldn't be, because it is. I mean, I'm going to go out on a huge limb here. I'm going to make a very bold statement right now, but I think you could point to the holy trinity of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Batman, and Darkman as this perfect storm of success, both artistically and financially, that led to people being like, okay, we can stick with this. People often wonder after the likes of Howard the Duck, or even after like Superman 4, like how the comic book movie survived, right? Or how you got to the moment where like Wolverine Origins is like fucks everything up, or even Spider-Man 3 really offends a lot of audiences. And everybody's just like, oh, this is it. This is the death of the superhero movie, but it keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. I think if you really look at this point with these 3 films as just being kind of that thing that just kind of proved once and for all that there is a way to make these successful movies, and it's not a perfect formula. Every one of them kind of does a little bit different here and there, but there is something in each of these movies that you then see dragged on later to be the eventual success to the superhero genre as what it is today. Because before these 3 movies, the best you had was like Superman from years earlier, and it was not there. There's nothing in Superman, Richard Donner's Superman, that stands the test of times for how you make a good Superman movie, as we've seen with things like Superman Returns and stuff like that. So whatever worked then is clearly not something that's working now.
I don't need to see Krypton. I don't need to see Krypton. I don't mean to be rude, but like, I get why Richard Donner's Superman has so much on Krypton. I understand it, because he was trying to tell this huge, sweeping story, and he had Marlon Brando to play Jor-El. Like, he had all this stuff, like, yeah, I'm making this definitive film version of Superman, when really everybody's just going to be excited that it looks like Christopher Reeves is flying.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. You'll believe a man
Yeah.
can fly. That's the
Yeah.
tagline. Nobody cares about what was going on Krypton before.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think it took a while for us to kind of find our footing in the genre, but I think that this time period, this 1990, this 80, 88 to 92, right? Like where these were all kind of being made and sequels were being made, and we were solidifying what like the franchise, the comic book franchise was going to look like. This is the time when superhero movies really start to form in what we now know them to be. It just took a while for them to percolate, another like 10, 15 years for them to percolate.
Yeah, but this is the start of that DNA. This is, if
Mhm.
you trace it back, it's so important. And I can't stress enough. Like, you don't get Mystery Men if you don't have Ninja Turtles,
Yeah.
and that is because of Flaming Carrot, right? People don't know Flaming Carrot, but they know the Mystery Men because they got the movie. And I don't. It's awesome. It's awesome that this film, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just as a franchise, it speaks on so many different levels. But related to cinema, this is an important film as far as I'm concerned. And if I were doing anything about comic book adaptation, this would probably be on my syllabus because it's important.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know. I'm repeating now. I fucking love this movie so much. I'm so bummed that I didn't get to see it in theaters. And even though I've seen it so many times, and I'm still bummed about that time where like we all sat down to watch that movie, and then afterwards they're like, "Wow, like you really care about that movie? Like you were crying," and I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'm crying. I see a lot of myself in Raphael, and it's fucking heartbreaking that like." He has to learn these lessons about, like, you're fucking angry, and you need to learn that, like, that anger can destroy you. Yeah. Right? Like, if I didn't have this, I might still be an angry young gentleman.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, we owe a lot. The show owes a lot. I mean, this is not the first time we have talked about the Turtles on this show.
No,
And
I have like, a VHS in the studio because it's an important part of the DNA of the Say Report, not just cinema. Sorry.
Yeah. No, and it just, when we get back to watching superhero movies on the big screen again, just remember where they came from.
Yeah, that's it. That's what this is about, remembering. And also remember that because of this, I'm gonna have to watch Secret of the Ooze again. Thanks. Thanks, Sejan.
For every Iron Man, there's an Iron Man 2, but we'll get there.
But yeah, we'll get there, and that'll be an interesting discussion. Hopefully. I don't know. Anything further you'd like to add, Sejan, before we send this one off?
Yeah, watch it. That's the last thing I'll say. Is like it's all three of them are up on HBO Max right now. That's where I watched.
They're leaving at the end of November, which is
all the
when
more
we're
reason to get
recording
to
this.
watch them now. Then.
Yeah, well, but yeah, they're out there. I think you can get like a 4-pack for like $7 on Amazon. Last time I checked, and you get 2 really good movies in that. And then 2 that are definitely worth watching. But this film alone, I love this movie. I absolutely love this movie. And yeah, watch it. That's not bad. And respect that it's important in some way, even if not in every way. I need to stop talking. So if you want to tell me to stop talking, you can find me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
And you can find me at Siege versus the World. I'm gonna be posting "Rock the Half Shell" by K-Rhyme every day for the rest of my life.
What is Rock the Half Shell?
For the 25th anniversary of this film, they brought K-Rhyme back, partners in crime, I should say it right. But they brought them back for because they did Turtle Power for this movie to do a new song called "Rock the Half Shell." And no joke, the chorus of that movie to the chorus of that song is "Shredder won't like it, rock the half shell."
I guess I'm gonna recommend, if we're sending out recommendations, watch the Coming Out of Their Shells tour. It is up in its entirety on YouTube. You can definitely find it on YouTube. Where they have to save
music?
Yeah, it's where they use music to defeat the Shredder. Yeah. It's where Pizza Power comes from. The greatest Ninja Turtles related song ever. And I know that's like a big swing, but Pizza Power It's the superfood delight. Piece of power. That's what makes us feel all right. Nah, Partners in Crime's good too. Because it calls Raphael the leader. And that pisses so many people off. And it's like, but they didn't know anything but the movie where he's kind of the only one who gets character development. Right? They cut out all the other character development. Mikey has a story on the farm. Instead, he says nothing in the film. Sorry.
I would watch a 3-hour cut of this movie. Anyway, yeah.
I think we all would, right? You and I definitely would. All right, that's it. That's enough. So thank you very much for joining us for this time capsule episode. Not sure when it's dropping. I hope that everything is happy, healthy, strong, and safe in your lives. And Will, please bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report. And you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.